YouTube before, at least that I'm aware of. Okay, so I'm going to do a review of Augustine's Confessions, of course. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Wow, excellent. I'm going to talk a bit about Augustine himself, a bit about his biography, the purposes of the Confessions. Then I'll talk about some of the significant themes in the Confessions, especially the themes of order and disorder. I'll talk about Manichaeism and Platonism and how those philosophical systems helped him to deal with the issues of order and disorder. And I'll talk about humility and Christian practice and the significance of practice for Augustine. I have my text with me, and I'll be referring to some passages. If you have yours with you, I'd suggest you take it out so you can look with me at those passages. But if you don't, wow, you have your texts. I'm impressed. If you don't, I'll tell you what book and chapter I'm reading from so that you can write that down in your notes and refer to it later if you need to. Okay, first a bit of Augustine's biography. He was born in the year 354 in Tagaste, T-H-A-G-A-S-T-E, which is a city that he mentioned several times in the Confessions. It's a city in North Africa, and it was, of course, under the Roman Empire, part of the Roman Empire, so he's living in a context of Roman imperialism. And in Rome at that time, in the Roman Empire, I should say, Christianity was the state religion. It was the official state religion, so that people were expected to practice Christianity as a form of obedience to the state. But that doesn't mean that everyone was indeed a devout Christian. There were many who, went to worship and sort of performed the rites of worship, but also worshipped Roman gods and performed other rites as well. So his father, Augustine's father, was not a Christian. His mother, Monica, was. And we read quite a bit about Monica in the Confessions, how she tried to raise him as a Christian, although she was reluctant to get him baptized because she was afraid he would sin after baptism. And the common belief at that time is that was that if you sin after baptism, then you're responsible for all of those sins. So she tried to kind of raise him in a Christian environment, and he's got that always in the back of his head, at least as he tells it in the Confessions, sort of an echo of the Christian belief and practice in which his mother tried to raise him. As a teenager, he went to Carthage to study rhetoric. And what they were assigned to do, rhetoric is the art of speaking and writing persuasively and eloquently. By the way, if I'm going too fast or you need something repeated, just raise your hand and let me know. So he went as a teenager to Carthage to study rhetoric. And they were, as rhetoric students, they were required to read famous philosophers' works. But not to read the content per se, but to read and learn how to imitate the philosopher's style. So this is what he was doing as a student in Carthage. And I'm looking at Book 3, Chapter 4, where he's reading Cicero. Reading Cicero in order to learn to imitate Cicero's style. But he begins to read Cicero's content. He begins to read what Cicero is actually writing, not simply how he wrote it. And as he writes in Book 3, Chapter 4, this is on page 58, about the middle of the paragraph at the bottom of the page, the title of the book is Hortensius, and it recommends the reader to study philosophy. It altered my outlook on life. It changed my prayers to you, O Lord, and provided me with new hopes and aspirations. All my empty dreams suddenly lost their charm, and my heart began to throb with a bewildering passion for the wisdom of eternal truth. I began to climb out of the depths to which I had sunk in order to return to you. He read in Cicero a call to become a philosopher. That is, as he tells us on the next page, a lover of wisdom. And something in the back of his mind told him that to be a lover of wisdom will bring him closer to God. Again, that echo of Christian teaching from his mother tells him that to be a lover of wisdom will eventually bring him closer to God. And so, as he says in the last paragraph on page 59, the only thing that pleased me in Cicero's book was his advice not simply to admire one or another of the schools of philosophy, but to love wisdom itself. Excuse me. Whatever it might be, and to search for it, pursue it, hold it, and embrace it firmly. So from this point, he dedicates himself to that search for wisdom. He dedicates himself to becoming a lover of wisdom, to search it out, hold it, embrace it firmly, and therefore eventually come to know God. That search led him in several directions, which we'll talk about. We'll talk about the Manichaeism and Platonism that influenced him. And again, ultimately, it led him to Christianity, at least as he tells the story. He went from Carthage to Milan at the age of 29 to teach rhetoric. And in the midst of his intellectual pursuits, Augustine was also kind of, how can I say it? He was a randy fellow. He was sexually curious, and indeed very driven by his sexual desires. He lived with a woman and fathered a child with her, the son Deodatus, of whom he speaks in later books, with whom he wrote a book, apparently, when Deodatus was 15. And he was forced to leave that woman, but quickly found another in order to satisfy his sexual desires. So sexuality, sexual desire, was really a very strong influence on Augustine's life. And we can see that not only in his descriptions of his life, but in his theological concerns. We see him struggling a great deal with concerns about lust. So he goes on this spiritual journey, this intellectual journey. He engages in some sexual behavior along the way and struggles with his sexual desires. Eventually, once he has received both spiritual and intellectual confirmation that Christianity is that wisdom that he's been seeking, he becomes a Christian. He's baptized in 387. And this is really significant as well. The next year, he founded an ascetic community in Tagaste. And so for Augustine, it's significant to see that being a Christian and living an ascetic life go hand in hand. And I'll talk about that more later. In the year 391, Augustine visited the city of Hippo, also in North Africa. And as he describes it, he was ordained the priest of Hippo against his will. The people urged him to become their priest, and he didn't want to do it, and they urged him, and finally he gave in, and he became a priest.